Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Outside the Box. And as you guys can see, if you're watching this on YouTube, but if you're listening, I'm with Jamie Winship right now, and this is our third conversation. And we're going into the holidays, and there's just so much to talk about. And Jamie, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Yeah. It's a stressful season, just as we were talking about.
we were, right before we hit record, we were, going over a little bit what we wanted to talk about today. And this season it's almost like forced happiness all around us.
Yeah.
Like everyone, it feels like you have to be in a certain mood. And if you're not feeling that way, or if you've had a tough year, you feel like you might have to put on a show, but you don't really feel it. What's kind of some of your thoughts heading into the season? What do you see with some of this?
Exactly that. It's, because of these conversations we've been having about truth-telling and especially truth-telling. And most of us kind of live in a sort of a coping mechanism deniability world, where we don't really have to go too deep in what we really think about things like ourselves, all those places that scare us. And then you hit this cultural phenomenon of Christmas where it's supposed to be, as you're saying, this jolly, it's a holly jolly Christmas and family. And you're coming out of Thanksgiving, which may have been good or bad, but into this month-long emphasis on gift giving and connectedness and peace on earth and joy and all of that. And it can force people into a place where they finally have to say, like, my family's dysfunctional, yeah, or I'm all alone, or I'm broke. These truths that in any other season you just might be able to manage, but this makes it difficult. And when I was a police officer, this was the worst time to work, was because of the suicide rate and the depression rate and the family fights and those sorts of things that were going on. It was just like, wow, this is not the way it's supposed to be.
Well, do you think it's partly just because you just become more aware of maybe how lonely you are, how
Yes.
unhappy you are,
right?
So that awareness can be overwhelming.
Right. Yeah, because if you're not regularly in this healthy, paying attention to the truth of what's going on around you and inside of you, if that's not a common practice, then these kinds of external pressure to face it, it can be devastating to people, or just mildly depressing. But it's a time of year, and even I work pretty hard on this internal journey, and even for me, it's I'm like glad when it's over. I'm glad when the emphasis is off money and presents and decorations and all of that stuff.
There's a lot of pressure around it, and again, it's kind of external. I think it feels like keeping up with the Joneses is put on steroids. Come the holiday season, and but we've talked a lot, and you talk a lot about truth telling and how that's a positive thing. Is this a bad type of truth telling?
It's just too much. It's too much too fast. And there's once you've sort of told the truth about the negative, you don't have anywhere to go from that, right? That's what's hurtful. Is like, okay, this is the truth that I believe about the world that I am all alone. You come to that sort of harsh thing because maybe you're alone on Christmas Eve or whatever. You come to that harsh place like, wow, I really am alone. I really don't have any deep relationships with anyone. That's a great place to start because it's actually not true.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so then if you have a community or a way to go forward with someone saying, okay, but let's talk about, are you really alone? Then it's a very beautiful process. But if you're in that place where you just sort of self-empty, and then there's no truth there to replace it, it's devastating to people.
Or it could, I would imagine it'd be more devastating if if you're doing the opposite of truth telling, you're faking it.
Yes.
And you're trying to act a certain way or be a certain way, and then you don't get the power of self-emptying.
Right.
And, and then you're probably internally realize even more how alone you are and how unhappy you are.
Yeah, and and then you figure you're just coping with it.
Right.
You're not even, you're at least the one person is at some point of trying to truth tell. The other person is just in really actual just falsehood. Which is how a whole culture can just drift along saying things that actually aren't true and function for a long time, as long as the props are there, but it'll shipwreck. It's just a matter of time before some crisis comes, COVID, a pandemic or something that really shakes it to the core.
So what are some healthy ways to approach this season if we know it's going to be a tough one for us in particular? We might be isolated in certain ways. We might not be able to see people that we're used to seeing.
Mm-hmm.
It could be, this harsh reminder of loss and of being alone. Talk to us a little bit about some healthy ways to deal with some of those truths.
Yeah. So, as we've been saying all along, the worst thing for humans is to be in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
So for anyone out there, whatever you do, do not isolate yourself. Do anything, listen to a good podcast, read something that brings you back out into some kind of community. So if the person is just absolutely isolated, this is a difficult time. But this is where that beautiful word hope comes in, which is interesting. It's ironic because this is the season where we talk about hope and love and faith, and these words that we think of as abstract. They're actually not. They're actually very concrete things. But
what does that mean?
Well, so that's interesting and a really another discussion. But so in sort of world anthropological thinking, there's really kinds of only two ways to think about the world in terms of intellect or actually language. One is, it's called Hebraic thinking. It doesn't have anything to do with Judaism or Hebrew. It's just the term. It's a way of thinking called Hebraic thinking, and it means to think holistically in wholes, not in separate. And then the other way is Hellenistic thinking, which is to break everything down into its smallest components and analyze it. And so these two ways of thinking, so as we go back historically, humans around the world only thought Hebraically. Like they would never think to separate, as Descartes will say later, they would never separate the mind from the body. It would never even occur to them. It's all one. Everything's all one thing. We're inside of a whole system. We're wholes. Everything's whole, and every part affects the other part. Hellenistic Greek thinking comes on the scene, and for 400 years, these two views have a war, basically, for dominance. And until really about just probably the Enlightenment, sort of that time period, the Hellenistic viewpoint becomes the worldview. So in Hebraic thinking and language, there's no words that can be spoken that cannot be seen, right? So if you use a word like love, you would never use a word like love without an example. There it is. So, for example, my son is married to a Jordanian, an Arab woman. And so if you ask her, and so I have two daughters-in-law, one very American, raised in the U.S., the other very Arab, raised in the Middle East. Has nothing to do with religion. It's where they're raised in the world. So if I ask my daughter-in-law from the U.S., does my son, your husband, love you? She will say yes. Oh yeah, he does.
Yeah.
How do you know? Oh, he tells me. But if which can mean anything.
Right.
Well, I don't know, what. But if I ask my Arab daughter-in-law, does my son love you? She'll hold out her hand and shake the gold bracelets that he's given her. She doesn't say yes or no. She's pointing to something that he's demonstrated her love that's visible.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
So if we say, how do you know that person loves you? And they say, he tells me, that means nothing to a Hebraic thinker.
Okay.
It's like when you ask someone, do they love you? You point to an act of their love towards you.
Okay.
It's very beautiful and very powerful, which means that the word love can never be an abstract idea. Like it's just up in the sky. I can say, I love you and I love my car. Right? They're just words that float around and they don't ever have to really be lived out or demonstrated. So
does the demonstration, does that mean like conditional, or like can you do that in like an unconditional way?
Yes, that's right. And so when she shakes those, that means for her, it means in her context, it means he came to her family and said, your daughter is so valuable to me, I will give you anything in order to have her. That's how, and the family says how valuable she is, and he has to pay the price for her. He has to purchase her, not in a negative way or in a property way, in a value way.
Okay.
It's really fascinating.
That's fascinating. And that's Hebraic.
That's Hebraic thinking,
Okay.
right? And so, like if I'm reading a text that's Hebraic, and if it says, like, instead of saying the person is angry, it would say the person's nostrils flared. They wouldn't use the word angry. They would give a picture of anger itself.
Okay.
So
makes total sense.
Everything they say is something that you can see, touch. It's like you know exactly what they mean. When you switch over to Hellenistic thinking, it's much more just up in your head. So it loses its power of having to be demonstrated.
Could that be a positive thing in that sense? Because it has less power, you're not as controlled by lack thereof or something along those lines?
Well, I think what happens is
we just believe in it less, maybe.
Yeah, we do. We believe in it way less, and words cheapen. They become cheap.
Yeah.
So, so we can use words like love and forgive, and these words, and they don't really have any substance to them. So we're like, yeah, I forgive you. Where's the visible expression of actual forgiveness? Like, where is it?
Yeah.
If we don't see it, then you can say anything you want, and so we can go to like religious gatherings and everyone's talking about love and forgiveness, and then they walk away and do exactly the opposite because there's no actual requirement to act out what you just said.
So what qualifies the demonstration? Like, if you're asking for forgiveness or trying to demonstrate some form of forgiveness, what if the person that you hurt doesn't accept that forgiveness?
Yeah, they still would have this evidence that you meant it.
Okay. So
they don't have to receive it.
It's tangible.
There it is.
Okay.
Right. There's their act.
And that's on them at that point.
Right.
Where it's like it's a personal thing on their end.
Right.
You've demonstrated that you're sorry.
Right.
Or something along those
lines.
Right.
So just thinking foreign policy, if we're going to say to each other as nations, to forgive means to cancel the debt that's owed. That's what forgiveness is, to cancel the debt that's owed. So there's no denying this person owes this person something. We've stolen something and then we can't repay it. And forgiveness is just an accounting term. It's very unemotional. It just means I cancel the debt. You can't repay it. We cancel the debt. Once the debt is canceled, it can never be brought up again.
Okay.
Right? So the demonstration is, I will never refer to this, talk to you, keep a list of those things that you've done that hurt me. That's forgiveness. And so the person can say, how do you know that person forgives you? Because this is what they do.
I would imagine that, I'm not married, but I would imagine that that'd be a very powerful tool in marriages, long-term relationships, that ability to cancel a debt.
That's right.
And, for me, if I hurt somebody, to know that's not going to be held against me
Right.
in the future.
And to be convinced that it's not.
Yeah,
There's
like actually believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I had, there's evidence for me to conclude that this will never be brought up against me again. That's incredible release and freedom. Just like today, I was making a left turn, in 2 lanes that turn left, and the person next to me, I just had this feeling they were just going to cross over, and they sure enough, right in front of me, and I toot my horn. So as soon as that happens, I have this choice of what I can do.
Yeah.
Right. And so forgiveness is I just cancel that debt.
Yeah.
Right. You took away a freedom I had right there.
You know what's interesting, as we're talking about forgiveness, and what came to my mind was like a guilty conscience. I can sometimes put myself in this position of feeling bad for a thing that I think somebody took a certain way, but I'm not sure that they did.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel that way, and it's just interesting how that's definitely all up in my head.
Right.
And it's not even a debt that needs to be forgiven, but I feel like I need to be forgiven of it. I
Right.
feel like I need it canceled. Like I feel like I need affirmation that they didn't take it the wrong
Right.
way.
You just need evidence that it's no longer an issue.
Yeah, it's really
How liberating that is.
so
right?
liberating, especially in a relationship. And now, what would be some tangible ways of looking at hope?
Yeah.
you
So
know?
right. So hope. So forgiveness. Going back to the Hebraic and the Hellenistic thing is, so for forgiveness for real forgiveness to occur, there has to be an offense, right? So
Okay.
nothing makes a relationship deeper than forgiveness. Okay, so follow me on this. So nothing makes a relationship deeper than forgiveness. The person who's in a position to forgive another person is in a very powerful position, because if you've hurt me and I need to forgive you, I am now in the position to either take our relationship to a whole much deeper, more beautiful, or to stop it,
Right.
like to violate it, to separate.
Right.
So what we learned, believe it or not, when we were working counterterrorism, is that to get the focus group that we were trying to get inside of, to get them to stop being violent, we would actually try and put ourselves in positions where they could injure us so that we could forgive them. Because once they injured us and we could forgive them, that relationship was sealed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we started we need to get in a position where they offend us or hurt us. Why? In order that we can demonstrate to them without a doubt that we care about them. How? By forgiving them. The greatest act of love a human could do to another is to forgive them. Right?
That is wild.
Right.
And did you know that actually part of like the body's ability to heal, you actually, there's a lot of things you do you actually re-injure the injury to get the body to heal itself.
Isn't that
It's very similar to
Right.
what you're talking about, with, somebody that you want them to know how much you care, or that you love them.
Right. Unconditionally.
Yeah.
Is to demonstrate, even when you injure me, I will stay with you. I will.
Now,
Yeah.
I can imagine where resentment could come into play here if I'm the one on the forgiving side, and I'm making the relationship deeper. How do I not hold resentment a little bit?
Yeah.
Because I'm not seeing that on your end,
Right.
I'm the one who's done the forgiving.
Right. So when I go to forgive, the resentment, like if I refuse to forgive, the only person that the refusal to forgive hurts is myself. Right. So it's really for my own.
Can you say that one more time?
So if you offend me and I refuse to forgive you, my refusal to forgive you doesn't have any impact on you. It has all the impact on me. I'm the one that becomes embittered by it.
Ew.
Right. So it's like the old adage that refusing to forgive is drinking poison to hurt the other person. It doesn't. It hurts you.
Interesting.
So for my own health, I'm forgiving. Right?
Yes.
For my own health. And so it releases me from the scenario. Right.
So is resentment more of a sign that you actually didn't forgive them?
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And resentment is a statement about your identity, because if you hurt me and I gain identity from you hurting me, that's super destructive, or a victim mentality. A, 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 Another person's actions cannot defile me. It can only defile them. The only power it has over me is whether or not I will cancel the effect, cancel the debt, cancel the effect of the thing on me.
And you're saying we have the power to cancel that.
Yes.
Whether that be a debt or any other thing that somebody could inflict on you.
Exactly. So I was with a guy not long ago, and we were working on these issues, and he was mid-30s, up in a professional, really uptight, very nervous, talking to me, and he was saying, I think I'm a good person, but I have trouble concentrating, and he was telling me these different things that were going on in his life. Had a relationship with this young lady that he really loved, but he panicked and pulled out of the relationship, and it hurt her feelings, and he doesn't know why he did it. This kind of hurtful behavior that he's doing, and he doesn't know why exactly. And so I just said to him, just tell me about your kind of growing up. And he said, when he was in 8th grade or 9th grade, his dad left. And he said, we're a very religious family. I thought everything was okay. One day I come home and my mom says, your dad's moved to another city. And he goes, my dad was a great dad. He didn't hurt me. He just disappeared. And since that time, now in his 30s, he's gone to his dad. He's met with his dad, had they're friends and everything. And I said, so yeah, but what was the effect on you when you realized that your dad was no longer there, and when you were, in 8th grade or whatever? And he goes, oh, it didn't really have any effect on me. And I said, I want you to think like this. I want you to think of it like, did your dad steal anything from you when he left? You should have seen his face.
What did he steal?
My example of a good marriage. My example of what a loving father would do. He said he stole my belief that I was more valuable than some other woman. Stolen from him. And he's never sat down to think, because I'm looking at his outward characteristics and his actions. They're the characteristics of a horribly wounded person that thinks they're okay. And so I said, your father has a responsibility to be a dad to you, whatever that scenario is, and not just to abandon you. And when you abandon a young kid, you rob them of their childhood. And who's going to pay that back? And he just started to weep. And I said, forgiveness that's deep down inside of you, and you need to cancel the debt that your dad can never give back to you. But you're still holding that debt.
And that kind of, tells me you have to truth tell.
Right.
About the pain.
Yes.
That, others may or may not have caused you.
Right.
And that truth telling allows you to, it's kind of like what we talked about in a previous podcast around that assertive part of your brain where you can decide what to do with it.
Right.
Versus living unaware.
Right.
Or just living in denial.
Right.
Just denying that your dad ever hurt you, even though, because we're buddies now. And,
right.
But he left me when I was 8.
Right. And we're just going to pretend that didn't happen instead of like, no, let's face that it happened. And it's very beautiful to be able to release your dad for whatever reasons your dad did what he did, but to cancel the debt because it is still affecting you that he saw something as more valuable than being with you. Right. And so the way that I knew that was happening was he was talking about, I fell in love with this girl and I really loved her. And then I don't know, I just panicked and pulled out of the relationship. Why? Because I don't have an example of how to have a good relationship. Where did you miss that? When my dad left.
Yeah.
See, those things are all interrelated, but he doesn't have a place just to sit and talk through them. And it doesn't have to be professional counseling, but it could be just friends. Where the friends we've made a pact. Hey, we're going to try and tell the truth to each other, and be able to practice and to tell truth. So all that comes back around to hope. Is hope, like forgiveness, hope can only happen in darkness. Hope can only be born in darkness. You don't need hope when everything's going well. It's not what hope is. Hope is learned. Like fear, hope is learned. And fear is hope turned back in on yourself. That's what fear is.
Fear is hope turned back inward.
Right. So if I ask someone, if someone's telling me, what are you afraid of? I'm afraid of this happening. What they're saying is, my fear is that I hope this thing doesn't happen, and I'm pretty sure it is. So the hope gets turned backwards at them into self-protection and self-promotion instead of being outward in hope. Hope is in things we can't see. That's what hope is for the things that we can't see yet. No one hopes for what is seen. They hope for what is unseen. So when do you hope for things that are not seen? When you're in a place where you can't see the good. You can't see the beauty. You can't see like this is going to be okay. That's when hope is it's the light in the dark place. It's the candle in the darkness.
So a lot, we've talked a lot about this with fear, and we can do the same with hope. I'm guessing in that you can use it as a tool.
Yes.
And say you are in a place where you need hope. Would you argue that we all are always in that place, or
well, the question is,
it's more obvious, in some situations and
right.
in some times of our lives,
Yeah, no, I think there's times when things are just going, I mean, at least in our, in our world, we're in our first world problems.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of times when it's kind of going the way that you had hoped. So when I say it's going the way I had hoped, it means in some dark place of failure, I had hoped it would look like this, right?
Would you say that hope is something that helped you get?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But here's the key about hope. And again, it's like identity and all these other things. Hope has to be taught. People don't just have hope. They have to, hope has to be me in a dark place, seeing a person that's in a dark place, and they have hope. So my hope is built on something in the past that I can look to.
Yeah.
In the present tense that takes me into the future. That's the beauty of hope.
Because hope, hope requires some sort of evidence that it's possible.
That's right. Exactly. Okay. Otherwise, it's just optimism and it'll get crushed.
Okay.
Hope is like, and it's funny where kids learn hope. Either they can learn it from their parents, like the family goes through a rough time, and the child is watching the parent not give up.
Ooh. Yeah.
Right? And they're like, wow, but the parent is truth telling. Like, yeah, this is a hard time. We're having a hard time. It's, this happened, but we're going to be okay. What is that called? What is that called? Hope. That's hope, but it's real, right?
Yeah. And, I love documentaries, and I think you do too. It seems like a lot of, highly successful people can point back to an example, a single mom, a parent, a dad that exhibited that, and they reference that as a huge reason they are where they are.
That's right.
Because you've seen how something that, well, basically you've seen how you get from here to here.
Right. You
or somebody.
Yeah, you have faith. Faith is the substance of the things we hope for. There's a reason to believe that this could be done. It's not foolish. It's not blind optimism. It's like, no, I can tell you why I hope this is going to work out. That's real hope. It's built on something in the past that gives you the capacity to believe that this in fact could happen, even though I can't see it yet. So an example documentary, watching this, we were talking earlier about this documentary on comedians, and comedians would come to California, come to LA, and they would get these little terrible apartments, and they would start just writing jokes, these comedians, and trying to sell them to the established comedians for $25 or something. They would sleep on the back steps of the Comedy Store trying to get just one interview. They have a hope,
right,
that they're going to get the opportunity if they stay persistent, if they stay with it. Based on what? Other stories of this working.
So how do you make sure, because I'm going back to when you said hope can be turned inward,
right,
and it become fear.
Mm-hmm.
How do you avoid that from happening? How do you keep it forward and
Mm-hmm.
that way,
Right,
versus inward?
Because hope that's forward motivates you forward.
Okay.
Fear, so like, oh, I hope this doesn't happen. That's hope turned the wrong way. Like I hope that I don't go bankrupt doing this. I hope that my family stays safe. Then you start making decisions that actually self-promote and self-protect, right?
Totally.
Versus, wow, if we commit ourselves to working on this, then our hope is that this work will pay off. What's that hope based on? Hard work pays off.
And that's operating, your energy's coming from the hope versus coming from the self-protection, self-preservation fear.
Right.
And we've talked a lot about how, some people get their energy from fear, but a more sustainable way is getting it from, or operating out of joy. Could hope lead to joy?
Yeah, right. Hope is like, it's sort of founded and produces joy. Right.
Okay.
It's like why are we going to get up and do this thing again? Because we have a real sure hope that this result is going to occur based on what we're doing. That's purely hope. Have you seen the result yet? No. But we will. We believe we will. Based on what? Based on things in the past that we do know.
Is that different than faith? Because if faith,
Mm-hmm.
it seems, doesn't have that piece, that evidence
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. Is that the difference between faith and hope?
Yeah, so faith is what gives us hope, right? So faith is the substance of why we have hope. So again, if I say, okay, we're working on this screenplay right now, why do I have hope that this thing's going to go? Because I've written things before that have worked, right? Okay. And so my faith in that process gives me hope for this thing that I can't see yet to work.
But you're not in a dark place, but you're still using hope.
Right.
So
right.
In this situation, are you manufacturing hope in the sense that because you're not in a dark place, you're using the hope to do something?
Mm-hmm.
Is it kind of the same thing, but you're using it
right.
You're using it differently?
It's a good question. So where did I learn this kind of hope? Well, where did I learn to have, faith in this process gives me hope for this thing to work out? Where did I learn that? I learned that in darkness from watching other people have hope. Now I use it. It's like a part of just how I live.
So you saw other people in dark places.
Or I was in a dark place and another person's hope rescued me.
Oh.
That's where you learn it, right? Just like, so like if I'm growing up in a family that's poor, and yet my family never thinks poor, talks poor, they're joyful, like, even though the situations are quite dark, I can look at my parent and go, yeah, they're like so hopeful that this is all going to work out somehow. That's where you learn it. Versus if I look at my parents and they're always freaked out and stressed out and scrapping and manipulating and fighting about money, I learn to be afraid.
And that would be, that sort of dynamic would be the hope turned inward.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
and then it's just like, I
fascinating.
hope we make it. I hope we make it. But it's all fear-based and it's inward. I hope so. That's not hope. Hope is what moves us forward. Yeah, it's a light in a dark place. It moves us forward. So when I say I hope, I have a hope. Hope is the expectation. I have an expectation that this is going to be worked out in this way. It's super motivating to me.
How do you? Because I believe that. How do you choose the right thing to hope for, or how do you choose what to hope for? Is this a something that that voice inside your head?
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of where it's coming
Yeah, and when you're talking again, I have a very high regard for humans.
Yep.
Not everyone does. Some people think the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. I don't think that's true. I think I believe in original goodness, as they say. And so when I'm talking to people we're, as we've talked about identity, when you're walking towards the truth of who that person is,
Meaning yourself?
The truth the true
Okay.
self,
Okay.
not this fake thing that we've created and invented out of self-protection, self-promotion. But when you're with a person and you're walking towards the truth of who they are, it's like walking through darkness towards a light within them. And when you're talking to the real them and you're asking them, like, what do you really want? What do you long for in the deepest part of you? Very few people say wealth. Very few people come up with that kind of, because it isn't what humans long for, or fame. Then if they say something like that, you're talking to the false, because they don't even know what that means, fame. But when you're talking, I wanna be valued. Yes.
Okay. And that's
yes.
Okay.
So like a person asked me the other day, and we were walking through this in a group, and the person said to me, well, what about ambition? What's wrong with ambition? And I said, what's the goal of ambition? That everyone looks at you and thinks you're the most awesome. Deadly. It's killing our culture. That celebrity goal, that, but there's nothing wrong at wanting to live at the highest level of your true identity as a gift to the world.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. And I said, trust me, that will outshine ambition. That'll outwork ambition any day of the week.
And is I can kind of see hope involved in that.
Yes.
Because we've talked a little bit about Michael Jordan here, but like in the Last Dance, I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to this watched it. He said this one line at the end. It's the very last episode, and he said it started with hope, and then that's what started this whole string of, winning. But it started with the idea of like, we could.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of a powerful starter. And,
Yeah.
and getting away from basketball and, sports or, even career and stuff, like, how can people start with hope, over the next couple of weeks? Say they haven't had it exemplified for them.
That's right.
And they're not sure if they're in a dark place or not. They're that guy who doesn't realize the hurt that his
That's
father
right.
put him through.
That's right. And I think that's the beauty of what you're doing, is to have a place where people can listen to something that just says to them, like, don't be afraid to ask this question. Do I have hope? What do I hope for? So I had to do a lecture on hope. And so I spent 2 weeks just whenever I was with people asking them, what do you hope for? Tell me something that you hope for. Most people did not have an answer for that question.
Honestly, I think I would struggle with.
Yeah.
I think I would struggle right off the bat to answer that question.
Right, because hope. You could say, "Well, I hope I'm wealthy." No, that isn't what hope means to people, right? When you think of hope, you think of That's a very human, beautiful, alive, living, redemptive word. And most people don't want to cheapen it with some ridiculous, celebrity. I want to be that thing. And so they do think, but what they realize is they don't have it.
Okay.
Right? And that's step one. Always. They probably do, but they don't know what it is.
So I'm imagining that hope most likely needs to be other focused, so outward thinking, not the hope turns inward.
Right.
Okay. So you can hope for, something positive to happen within your community. You can hope within your family.
Right.
Am I on the right?
Yeah.
I really think I would, if you were to ask me on the street, what I hope for, I'm a little ashamed to say, I'm not sure what I would say.
That's what I'm saying. It's not an easy question. Even when I think, what do I hope for? Because hope is so outward. It's so other focused. No, I hope, if I say, some people said to me, because depending on the groups I was in, I'm hoping that I could be free of drugs. That's a hope I have. Well, that kind of hope is very much outward, right? Because I'm hurting people in the state that I'm in.
Yeah.
So it's very beautiful. I hope that I become healthy. And when you ask them, what does that mean? They'll say things like, well, I'm angry all the time.
Yeah.
That's very beautiful hope.
Yeah.
Now, is there faith that they can achieve that? That's the next question.
So first hope, then faith.
Yeah, because your hope needs to be sourced in something, right? It has to have some kind of historical thing that pushes it forward. It can be a book you read. It can be a speech you heard. It can be anything, but it has to be sourced in something. It's not just coming out of me as a human being. That's what I'm saying. It has to be learned.
And I feel like that's part of the value of, I grew up with parents who were very conscientious of what I consumed. And I would imagine that those inputs have the ability to be that example
right.
as reference points,
Yeah, and so when you're, it's interesting when you're asking when a person says, I hope that I'm healthy. And I say, well, in what way? Well, I'm struggling with depression.
Yep.
Okay. So that means that somehow they have figured out that what they're feeling is not the right way to be. They have an example somewhere of depression isn't kind of the goal, or don't learn to cope with this the rest of your life. There's a hope, somewhere there's some substance that's giving you hope that maybe I don't have to be depressed all the time.
Yeah.
Or in poverty all the time, which is very much a mentality, right? That I have a poverty identity or a victim identity. And so when a person says, well, I hope one day that all people are equal, and then I'll ask them well, what would that be? What would it be? What would we have to be like for all people, just to kind of get it more zeroed in on that instead of that general? They say, well, we would have to just be, more accepting of others. Now I'm what does that mean? Because what it's going to come back to is me towards the other.
What do you mean, me towards the other in that scenario? I
need to be more accepting.
Okay.
When during this we thing, then I'm keep coming back well, who's, what do you mean?
It's so interesting you said that, because when you gave the accepting idea, which of course we all want to head towards a world, with more of that in it, that seems so out of our control. But when you start to say,
right,
I hope to be more accepting myself.
Right. That's what.
Then it's okay. Well, I can, I can do something about that.
Right. And that's what you really want. And so that's why people have a hard time saying, when I say, what do you hope for? Well, I hope for a better world. It's just thrown way out there. No. You. What do you hope for? If you hope for a better world, then tell me what actions you're taking to make that hope real.
So, kind of getting back to the Hebraic concepts.
Mm-hmm.
In that scenario, hope becomes a living word.
It is. Do you know what hope means in Hebrew? In Hebraic, like it's fascinating. Sometime we can do this. If we had a chart of words like hope, I would have an object to hold up that every Hebraic thinker would know. Oh, that's hope, the object. And so, in one of the symbols of hope in Hebraic thinking and language is a cord that has multiple plies to it. And the idea is the rope is the idea of expectation. So when you have a rope with you, you have it for a reason, right? So if I hold up a rope, it's like I'm holding in my hand expectation, and the rope is like, well, what does that tell you that I expect? To climb something, to tie up something. That's what I can't look at that without thinking something's going to happen.
That's interesting.
Right. And so it comes actually from the story in the Old Testament is one place where you see it, the story, whether you believe it, that it's literal or not, but of the walls of Jericho falling. And Rahab is the woman in the city who helps the Israelite spies get escape. And they tell her, when the city falls, we will come rescue you. Hang your expectation is the word they use out the window so we know to come get you.
Wow.
And so she throws a red multiplied, which means it's more than one, like 2 or 3 tightly twined or stronger than one. Yeah. That's the whole idea, that expectation is built in community. And so she throws this scarlet cord out the window. And when when the walls are all falling down and all that's going on, the only building that stands is the one where there's hope hanging out the window.
God.
And so what it says about her future is that she's a prostitute, Rahab the harlot. When it's going through her genealogy, she's the only survivor of that whole thing. It says her generations become the line of the Messiah. So not only is her hope not only saves her life, it saves the future of her generations. That's how powerful the idea of hope is. It's not just for you. It's for everyone that interacts with you. And so in my office, I have hanging in my office a red cord. And when I look at it, it reminds me that hope is expectation. That hope is like, okay, we're going to act on this hope. We're not just going to have it. We're going to move on it.
One thing about expectation, because expectation, I feel like, can also cause a lot of pain. You have expectation and it doesn't get met. Mm-hmm. And I, there's a saying, one way to be happier is to have less expectations mm-hmm. of others. Mm-hmm. But the way you talk about expectation as it being an equivalent to hope, to me, that it's just a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. What's the difference?
Well, because my expectation is never on another person.
Okay. So
that's what kills us, right? That's what hurts us, is I expect you to do something for me. That's not hope.
That's not hope
at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's self-protection, self-promotion, and fear-based. So expectation is what I expect in my true self to see happen in my life, and it's beautiful.
I was going to ask you. It's so funny you mentioned the red it's a rope.
It's like a red cord or a rope. Yeah.
In your office, I was going to ask you if you had any symbols.
Lots of symbols.
Do you? Is that one way that you kind of?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
I think that's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
And as we're talking about hope, I'm immediately thinking, man, I gotta get like something that says
a tattoo or something. Yeah. No, really, we need those symbols, and that's why Hebraic thinking is so powerful, because it's all symbol. It's never just one literal abstract word. It's it's a symbol of an entire set of meanings and deep level stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, I have a picture of me and the guy who trained me on the top of a bus going through Paris together. And that picture, just that picture of he and I on that bus on a street in Paris, is volumes that reminds me about my identity and how I understand it, and who gave it to me, who helped me understand my identity, and the value of him pouring into me, and how I have that one of my hopes and expectations is to pour into other people the way he did to me. So I have a faith. I watched him give me hope in a really dark situation, and I got hope. I learned it from him, and now I have faith that what he did in me worked, that it will work in another. So faith is the substance of what I hope for in the future, and that's my expectation.
Man, that's a beautiful way to end today. Jamie, this conversation has been so fun. I could go another couple of hours, but we do need to stop.
Yeah.
It's been such a pleasure, man.
Yeah.
And to everyone listening and watching, our hope for you is that you find hope this season.
Yeah. That's
and
right.
And from what we're learning from you, Jamie, hope is available to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of looking for it, finding that piece of evidence that you can get from point A to point B. So that would be my hope and prayer for all you watching and listening. Jamie, I appreciate you so much.
Yeah,
man.
thank you.
This has been a blast. We're gonna have to do another one.
Yeah,
surely.
It'll be fun. Yeah, I hope so.
I hope so too, guys. This has been Outside the Box. We appreciate y'all hanging out with us. We'll see you next time.
Don't go away.